Well, good morning, everybody. It is Heidi Kaizen at Hen Chick Studio in Conrad, Iowa. And I am so glad to have Kate Colleran with me this morning. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Heidi. It's so fun to be here.
Yes, and we're going to have so much fun just chit-chatting and talking this morning.
Mhm.
Where are you located now? Tell everybody where
I
you're
am
located.
I am in Colorado. I'm in a town called Highlands Ranch, which is just south of Denver.
Very good. And are you getting the snow? Did you get the snow that you sent our way this week? Have you-
We did get a little bit of snow, yes, but now we're also expecting, I guess, pretty cold temperatures. So,
Yes, we're getting those coming up as well. Well, we
hmm
are nice and toasty warm inside of me.
hmm
I'm at the store. She's in her studio, and we
hmm
are super glad to be here. And why are we here today? Well, today is the first day of a 4-week sew along that we're doing here at Hidden Chick Studio using a free pattern called Box Step. If you
hmm
have not downloaded your free downloadable pattern, all you have to do is go to henandchickstudio.com/box step, and you will be able to get that pattern immediately and download it. It's free. As I always say, there is no pressure. If all you do is download it and go, I'm going to get to it when I get to it, great. It's the sew along is, oh, and you've got a cuddly cat. And
Yes.
if you want to participate in our sew along, then we're going to be for the next today and the next 3 Thursdays, going to be doing a series of videos to help you through the process of making Box Step. Okay, and all hands up. Are you a cat person or a dog person? You all know I've got Ruby the lab. And Kate, what's your cat?
I'm This is Lark. We actually have two cats and a dog. So this is Lark. Her sister is Luna, who's a white cat with some black markings, and then we have a black and white Aussie named Kira. So I can't guarantee who you may or may not see this during this.
Hey, well, that's good. And I was just to full disclosure, I was running out the door real quick for a quick little break for Ruby so that she would be nice and happy for the next few minutes that we're talking. All right. Well, so in the series of 4 videos that we're going to be doing, all of which is free, all of which is going to be available on that Box Step page. So henandchickstudio.com/box step is where you're going to find the recording of this video. So if you're like, hey, I'm watching it live, but I've got to go back and re-listen to that, it's all going to be available on that Box Step page forever. And the exciting thing is if you do participate and upload your top by the deadline that we've got set in February, you have the opportunity to win prizes. So this is like, it's awesome. You sew, I give you prizes. I don't know. Could it be any better than that, Kate? I think that
It really can't. I mean, hey, you get to do the thing that you love to do and you get rewarded for doing it. I
I
mean, come on,
That's
right?
right. That's exactly right. And I think that this particular pattern, I was trying to think of something that would be a great stash buster because, oh, Kate, we all know, right, that we have
Yes.
got fabric in our
hmm
stash, or there's that next fabric bundle we want to buy.
I know,
And we
exactly.
were
I
like,
mean,
what are we going to,
I know,
there's
I know.
always
Whenever
something,
I see
isn't there?
those little fat quarter bundles, because like I'm a fat quarter addict. I really am. I mean, I have a thing. And if they're all bundled together, like folded cute and there's a little ribbon on the top, yeah, I can't resist.
Absolutely. So box step, it happens to be hanging behind you. So
Yes,
if
it
somebody
does.
wonders what box step is all about, gal, and before we even get to that, Kate, just tell us a little bit about you and
Oh,
your journey to this moment. Tell us a little bit. I mean, have you been quilting forever? What's your story?
okay. Well, see if I can do it in like a condensed version. So my story is I made my first quilt as a teenager, had no idea what I was doing, but a cousin who was married was having a baby. And I thought, baby needs a quilt. So not knowing what I was doing, I went to the local dry goods store and bought flannel and literally drew a square on a cereal box with a pencil and paper and, and cut it out and then drew that on the back of the fabric and
Mm.
sewed them all together with 5/8 inch seams. So that's how I got started quilting. Um, and then I worked as a nurse for a very long time. I was a nurse for 30 years. And in the middle, I mean, quilting just became like my therapy. And I met some women also in nursing who quilted. So I learned a little bit more. And then basically I met a woman and we decided we wanted to start a business. And we wanted to do something that was fun, different from working in a nursing home. And I by that point was always tweaking the pattern, always wanted to do my own thing, always started like instead of with a pattern with my own thing. So we started a pattern business. And she retired quite a few years into it. But now I've been doing it now for 20 years, designing patterns.
Isn't that exciting? And some of the things you said, it's quilting is therapy. We
Mm-hmm.
love to be able to quilt and to soothe our souls and all of those kinds of things. And it is fun, just to try different things. So that's very exciting. So when you were creating Box Step, did you
Mm-hmm.
have any particular, I'll say, inspiration or goal when you were making this particular design?
I wanted it to be something that, and sometimes quilts are fun when they're just one block, right? And you just make the same block because you can just chain piece and pedal to the metal. But also, I wanted when you put it together that it formed a secondary pattern. That's one of my favorite things. I love when a block that's exactly the same and you've made the same ones, they come together and all of a sudden you're not really sure where the block is because they form a secondary pattern. So that's kind of what I wanted a little bit with this block. I wanted it to be simple. I do happen to like some small piecing. One of the questions, and I'm sure you get this too, is always what's your style? Are you modern? Are you traditional? And I'm somewhere in between. You know, I'm somebody who likes to add a modern touch to traditional piecing and blocks. Um,
I always tell people when they ask me that question, well, look at the store. There you get the whole sense of all the styles that I like, because I do, just like you, I like something more traditional. I like something
mhm,
more contemporary. Sometimes it's the
mhm.
fabric that makes it contemporary. Sometimes it's the design. I mean, there's just a variety of ways, but absolutely love that. Very eclectic for me. So
Yes, and that's how I feel. I'm very eclectic, right? So, but one of the things I love, and I do tend to brights. I mean, I will say that I do tend sort of to the brighter side of things. But what I think is so fun about this is that it could be done with a line, which is how I started with the colors. So I picked a line of fabric, but it doesn't have to be. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
Um, but yeah, when I was doing box step, I just wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be simple, but I wanted it to have movement and form a secondary pattern.
okay. When the whole goal of today is to talk about fabric selection.
Mm,
And, in my career, I have seen it in a variety of different ways as well. And I always want to say everybody should have confidence in picking colors. Everybody should, because we all know what our favorite color is, but it doesn't happen that way. And for whatever reason,
right.
whatever reason, there
Mhm,
are some that don't have, I'll say, the confidence, or they, maybe they just don't have that sense of color that some other people do that we want, when you're making a
mhm.
quilt. So I think that's one reason why store samples always
Yes.
do well, because then people go, I can see the end result. I know how it's going to look. I'll be successful because I like that.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the I don't know. I don't want to say frustrations because it's not a frustration. Like I design a pattern and I do it in colors that resonate with me. But if you think about something like this, oh my gosh, you don't have to use these colors. And it's really hard for people to see past the color of the quilt that's on the wall. But so that's like a twofold thing,
Mm.
So if somebody saw this, but they saw, say, the fabrics behind you, right? They might think, well, those fabrics don't work in this, but they would.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes, yeah, you have to see it. Um, and I
Mhm.
always like to tell people, the thing about color is if you learn a little bit about color and you learn a little bit about value, it makes a huge difference because it's not always when you make a quilt and the colors don't work, even though they're colors you like, it's not always that the colors really didn't work. It's where you place them too. And understanding about value and colors that pop and colors that don't, and where you place them in your quilt makes a huge difference. And I always tell people, I was trained as a nurse. You know, when you talk to a quilt pattern designer who is a graphic designer and went to art school and all this stuff, you're like, well, they know that. They understand that, you know? I was a nurse. The only thing I knew about color was if it was red, make it stop.
There you go. There you go. I love it. And so in this particular project,
Yes.
the way you wrote the instructions, for a lot of for reasons of, I mean, lots of reasons, but is that you actually do call, I've got it right here, you call for dark, medium, light. You've even thrown in there medium cool, medium warm.
Yes.
Which, you know, is interesting. So let's, you know, I mean, let's kind of break that down. I mean, when you go to your fabric stash, how do you go? I'm like, when I think dark, medium, light, the easiest reference is black, gray, white.
Yes. Right. And of course, since we were doing this as sort of a black and white handout, that's why, you know, you start saying, well, if I do blue, they're not going to see it. So let's do dark, let's do light, let's do medium. But if they saw the picture of the quilt, I wanted them to understand, like, here's a warm, right? So what are warm colors? Those reds, those oranges, those yellows, right? And what do we know about warm colors? They pop out, right? So when you look at this, what colors pop out to you? Well, it's probably these guys. And then maybe secondary, these guys, right? And that's my light. And it's kind of it's a yellow green. And again, that yellow green kind of pops out at you. So knowing where you're going to put these kind of colors, do you know what I mean? But your question was really, where do you start, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you start? I mean, and again, that's so often like people go, oh, what do I do?
Right.
So what kind of tips can we give somebody? What is one way that somebody could say, I'm going to my fabric stash and I'm going to pick fabrics for box step?
Okay. So if they have the pattern, right, and they're looking at the block, right? So we're looking at the block. So if we look at my quilt, where's the block, right? You start to say, where is the block? Let's see if I can find a good one for you guys. So right here is the block. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, and I can even, if we decide we want to, I could pull up my EQ and show you the block.
Okay.
So the question is, where do you want to start? What do you want it to do? And if you want it to look like this, and this is what's fun about this too, you can turn these blocks and not have it come together like this and have a whole different design.
Because when I look at your quilt right there from the distance that I'm at, if you want to say through the camera, I see two spinning blocks. And what's funny is that the two spinning blocks are not the same block. They're the quarter sections. Like I see that spinning block and then that spinning block.
Yep. And those are all, yeah. And that's what you see. And this is where, again, this is a secondary design because this is where the corners of the block come together. So I think one of the things I would do is I would start with, well, first, let's talk about scale because these are all really small pieces, right? So if I were to grab something like, I brought a few pieces of fabric because of course I went to my stash and I said, all right, just grab a couple pieces. So here's a piece of fabric that I've had in my stash for a few years, haven't done anything with it yet. And it's bright and it's fun because maybe I want my quilt to look bright, right? So this kind of feels like a bright winter quilt, right? So maybe I want my quilt to be brighter. Maybe I want it to have the springtime feel. Or maybe I want to use, you know, fabrics like those ones behind you that have that nice, dark, moody kind of country feel. But let's say I wanted to do this. This isn't going to work in this quilt because one, it's directional, right? So because it's a plaid and it's so directional, if I put it here, it's going to be going this way, and then it's going to be going this way, and it's going to get chaotic looking. But I could use it to pick colors, right?
Mhm.
So maybe this fabric wouldn't work in my quilt.
Sort of like my shirt. My shirt
Yes.
probably not a good piece of fabric to cut up, but
Mm-mm.
could be a good color choice picker. Oh, great example.
I found this little fat quarter. I told you I'm a fat quarter addict, right?
Yeah.
So I found this little fat quarter in my stash. Now this is way too big. I mean, look at this. What would happen? You'd get almost nothing, right? Because it's such a small piece. But I could use this and pick fabrics from it. And
Mhm.
this is a great way for a quilt like this. If you're not going to start with like a preset fabric line, like they could come into your store right now, look at those fabrics behind you and say, that's a color palette I like. Let me pick a dark. And now let me pick something else. And look at the block and say, I want to have value change,
Right.
right?
Like I just grabbed a fat quarter pack that we have at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So right away there's dark in it.
Exactly. Exactly. And but if they don't want to go to a line, which is what I did here, this was a line from Allison Glass. So I lucked out. I had a line, already knew that she had decided these all went together, right? So then I just decided where did I want my look to come in. But let's say you don't want to go with a line per se. You want to go to your stash. Well, find a print maybe that you love, like this one. I think this is so pretty, right?
Mhm.
So what could I do? I could then go to my stash and say, all right, well, out of all of this, right, I want the purple and the green because purple and green are always a great combination. I want those to be the main thing. And then as I look at this and I sort of see these little contrasty things here, maybe that's where I'm going to pull out this little blue or maybe this sort of pale peachy color and add them as little pops of color. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
But
does. It
but
does. And I can see comments already about how helpful this is. So we're going in the right direction. So that's awesome.
Great. So one of the things I did was I went to my stash and I said, okay, I've got this. Do I have anything that goes with it? And as I told Heidi earlier, I moved recently. So a lot of my stuff is in storage right now. So I don't have a lot here with me, but I found this fun dot because I'm also a dot girl, love dots. They're just such fun. And look, doesn't that go beautifully?
It does.
So I could use this, one would think. But this is also, this scale is way too big. Because again, if I put this up here, look, you're barely going to get one dot in a square.
It
But I
almost
could
looked like
use,
you would almost look like you were fussy cutting. And then if you were
yes,
off, then it would look wrong. Yeah.
it would look wrong. But this scale, this would work, right?
Mhm.
So thinking about scale is important. But the other thing too is, because these are small pieces, we've got to think smaller scale. Otherwise, there's no point to it. But what you want to do when you think about that is not always make everything the same scale. Just because we want smaller doesn't mean they all have to be the same scale, right? So we want to get a little value change. We want to get a little variation in the size of the motifs inside what we're doing. I mean, this obviously would be great as solids too. I mean, it would be very striking as solids or all tone on tones. And these fabrics are close to being tone on tones. You have to get up really close to see some of the print in there. Um, but I think picking a what do you call it? Like a focus fabric and then
Mhm.
jumping off of it is really fun. I did another group. I had this little fat quarter bundle. Isn't this the cutest fabric?
That is.
Yes. And so I used it and I said, when I had picked this fabric, just because I have something I'm going to make out of it, okay, what can I can use this and pick colors again. And so like I have this little selection.
Pretty.
Yes. Now, so this is cute, right? This is cute. And these are all small scale, but they're not exactly the same, right? This one's really small and tight. This one's a little looser. So if I did it in the squares, I might only get a little bit of it, but that's okay, right? It's not like the dot where I'm going to like be cutting off half the dot and all you'd see is a piece of fabric and half a dot, right?
Mhm.
So something like this would be okay if I only got part of a motif. So I just think that, picking
And the
a
gingham,
focus fabric.
the check that you picked there on both of you, a couple different ones, would add some movement and a little bit of interest. I could see that. Yes.
Absolutely. And because it's a gingham and not a stripe, remember I talked about the stripe earlier that I had picked, or this plaid really. This would be harder to do in here, even if it was a smaller scale, because you're going to get it going this way, and it's very distinct. Whereas that little gingham, because it sort of goes both ways, it would be all right if one piece was going this way and one piece was going this way. It wouldn't be as distracting, right?
Yes. And okay, a couple of things just while we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about using those examples. So if I had that plaid, I would cut it
Mm-hmm.
on the bias and make it my binding.
Ah,
And that floral that you were
mm-hmm.
picking, wouldn't that
Mm-hmm.
work great for a border?
Oh, it would be fantastic. And to be honest, you know what I would do is I would just, because this I used and it was just a solid, I mean, or a tone on tone, I would make this border bigger. I mean, wouldn't that be
Yes.
great? Look at that.
Yes.
It could be a gorgeous border. And I would make it bigger to take advantage of the bigger print because I think that is what would, really make it pop. And also then it would sort of pull everything together. Sometimes people ask me though, if I pick a print like this, does it have to be on the front? It doesn't have to be on the front. It can just be your inspiration. It would be really fun as the border though, but
Mm,
it can just be your inspiration, you know?
that is
And
great.
yeah. But back to what you sort of first asked is how do you start, right? And I think you just pick a spot. So when you start picking the fabrics, pick something, pick your dark, pick your light, and build off of it. Do you know what I mean? Um, like for this, if I was using this as an inspiration, I would start with what do I want my dark to be? How dark do I want it to be? Do I want it to be this dark? Or do I want it to be more of like this color in here? And I would start with one fabric and then I would use that to build everything else. And then I would start to lay them out. When I lay out fabric, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but when I lay out fabric, I have a tendency to fold them kind of small and I put them next to each other because you want to sit there and say, okay, so how do these look next to each other? And also because when you put them next to each other, all of a sudden the value changes, right? This could be considered a medium next to something, but next to something else, it'll be a light. So I have to see what I'm putting it next to.
So do you use techniques like, I mean, both of us have been doing this a while. So you hear all sorts of things. So I always love taking a picture of
Yes.
my fabric because when I'm looking at it like this,
Mm-hmm.
it's very different than when I'm looking at it like, at an arm's distance. And a picture immediately does that. And with the option of our phones, it's amazing. And then the other trick that I wonder if you use is because again, our phones are I'm going to say we
Glued
have
to our
more,
hip.
yeah, and we have more technology at our fingertips than ever. What about turning it into black and white so that you
I don't,
immediately can see
yes,
the scale of
yes.
or the value, not the scale, sorry, the values of
Mm-hmm.
those colors that you've picked. Do you use either of those or have any,
I
tips like that?
I do. I use definitely taking a picture. I definitely do that. And I think we get a distance from it. Like you were talking about how you've got a distance from this because so you see things that you might not see if you were right up close, right?
Mhm.
So giving you that distance. And that's what taking a picture of the fabrics does for you. So I do that. Um, I also, I sometimes do the value thing, but I have a tendency not to. I mean, I don't know why. It's one of those things that I know about, and I've told people, oh, that's a good way to do that. But I have a tendency not to do it. I don't know why. Um,
That's all
but
right.
I know. But the other thing I love to do is sort of lay them out. Like, to be honest, before I made a final decision, I might try to like lay the fabrics out next to each other. All right, so here I'm going to put these three fabrics together. So I'm going to make like a little grouping of them. Even on the table in the shop, I'll take one bolt and then put the other bolt here and the other bolt here and say, how do they look together? Do I like that? Do you know what I mean? But also understanding how these come together is important. So if I put my light here, it's going to have a totally different look,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know?
And something that we do talk about all the time at the store, and of course, my computer is sitting on top of, but but there is a huge difference between
Mm-hmm,
taking two bolts and
mm-hmm,
going, oh, do these look good next to each other? Or take two fat quarters.
yes.
And that's kind of what you're talking about is that you're folding it up to even the size, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm,
but you might go, oh, those two, don't look good together. But then when you get them in a fat quarter, you're like, oh, wait a minute. They really do look better next to each other than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yes.
think, this is something I have to say, and people will apologize, customers. And if you're one of our customers and you've apologized to me, stop it. Don't ever do it again. That like we pull out bolts, right? That's our
Mhm.
job. That's part of the process, is that if we touched every bolt in the store so that you could get the quilt that you wanted, then our job is done, right? And we'll put them all
Yes,
away,
absolutely.
kind of thing. I mean, that's what it's about. But sometimes until you see it next to each other, and again, like when we're lining bolts up, I will say, okay, let's just look at the ends of the bolts, not
I turn them. Yes.
yes,
So
because
you only see this much.
it's totally different. I have dots. It's totally different when I see this versus
Mm-hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
kind
Yes.
of thing, to get that angle. Like, oh, this is my border fabric. But
Yes.
that's just another way of looking at it.
Yep. And speaking of, getting help in a quilt store, one of the things I tell people, I love to talk about color and I love to talk about how we all see color differently. And so I have can I tell you a quick little
Oh, of
story?
course. Yes,
Okay.
we've got all the time in the world.
We got all the time. So a few years back, I was taking a class. And when I take a class, I love to try to use fabrics I wouldn't normally use or colors I wouldn't normally use, just because I think that's kind of a fun thing. I'll make a block and see how it goes. So I had hand dyed some fabrics with a friend, and I brought these fabrics to make the block. And I'm standing there staring at the fabrics, thinking, I don't know if I want to add that color or not. So the instructor comes wandering over and she looks at me and she goes, what you doing? I said, well, I'm trying to decide if I want to add this color to my block. She goes, oh, I absolutely would add it. I love that mustard green. I'm like, oh, you think it's mustard green. So another student wanders over and she's looking at the same fabric. Now, three people standing in the same light in the same place. And she looks at it and she goes, oh, I hate gold. I wouldn't add that.
And isn't it true? Everybody does see color differently.
Exactly. So when you're working with someone, so like if you're in Heidi's shop and she's trying to help you find something and she pulls out a bolt and you think, oh, she likes that. I don't like that. Keep in mind that what may happen is, first of all, that's okay because
Right.
Heidi sees color differently than I see color, right? And things that work for Heidi may not work for me or work for you. But it might be a case of right church, wrong pew. So maybe Heidi pulled over a red. And for you and the way you see color, it's just the wrong red. And you need a different red to make that quilt work for you. So sometimes they're on the right track, but you've got to find the one that works for you.
I
So,
use the word audition all of the time. And
mhm.
we can pull a bolt from the back of the store and it looks one way, and you get it up here and it looks so different when we put it on the cutting table, and
Ah,
all those kinds of things that you've got to just it's not anything to ever worry about. It's just a process. And
it
by
is.
all means, it's your quilt at the end of the day. And you
Mhm.
have to like the fabrics and the choices. It's not my quilt. I'm not working on it. So if there's a different color option that you like, then that is what you've got to do. So,
Well,
and whoever's
exactly.
calling, I'll get the message when I get off of the air. So we're not open yet. So, but absolutely, there are so many different things to think about. And again, it's your quilt. And if you have a vision and I'm not seeing the vision as a shop owner, it's okay.
That's
It's
right.
okay. You have to keep going with it. I'm going to only try to provide, um, you know, uh, exactly what it is that, that you need and stuff. So
Oh, absolutely. And when you sit there and you look at it, like if somebody were looking at this and saying, well, I would never have put this warm right here, I'm okay with that. Do you know what I mean? That's that's the whole beauty of quilting is we can all make it look the way we want to make it look, right?
yeah,
Um, and what's really funny too is that when I designed this, I started in electric quilt, so EQ8, and started with like the little pictures of the fabric. So it's really funny because when I got the fabric in person, this was much lighter This aqua green was much lighter and much more contrast between here. I thought these were going to be closer together and that this right here would form more of a square because I thought these two were going to be closer together. But if you think about it, if you, for this piece, which is, what is this one called in the pattern? The medium cool, and this is my dark number 2. If they're slightly closer in value, instead of getting this sort of other unit, right, that you talked about, that pinwheely unit, what you'll get is a square here. Do you see that?
Yes.
So, and I kind of thought that's what I was going to get. But in person, the fabrics, the values were bigger difference, which I didn't realize. But yeah, so that's something to think about though, as you start to pick it. So if you're saying, well, I like having this pinwheel, but I don't want a second pinwheel, then make these two fabrics, your dark number 2 and your medium cool, closer in value, and you'll get a square here with a little bit of movement because there's 2 fabrics, but you could get a square, which would be kind of fun, you know, and give it a different look.
Very interesting. Okay. If, you know, again, we're looking for ways to help people choose their fabrics. You've started with a focal print. That's number 1. What's another option?
Another option is, well, I know we don't want to go too hard into like the color wheel thing. But another option is to pick a favorite color, right? So
that's easy to start with.
Right. My favorite color is blue. And then you can start to think about, well, what do I want to do with the blue? Do I want to have it all be all blues? Or do I want to maybe have it be blue in its complementary color? Or when you think about this, and I know we don't want to go too hard into the color wheel, but
that's okay.
This quilt is really what they call a split complementary, which means that I took blue and I used some fabrics on either side of blue. So I went a little green, blue, green. I went a little purple. So I have those analogous colors or that group of colors that go together, right? In the blues, but a little green and a little purple too. And then I picked its complement, which is an orange. And it added that pop. So it's kind of a fun way to do it. So if your favorite color is green, you could go like a whole bunch of greens, right? In a huge value change, and then pick one color maybe that is its complement on the color wheel to give it that little bit of a pop. You know, that would be a fun way to pick it too.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. What about you obviously love fat quarters, right?
I do.
So I know there's a few of our customers that have come in and they've bought fat quarter bundles. Let's just talk about like, okay, so I have this fat quarter bundle. What can I immediately go light, medium, dark? You know, do I start to say, can I insert more in there? You know,
absolutely.
What would you recommend? Okay.
So what I would do first with a fat quarter bundle, and I love fat quarter bundles. And as a matter of fact, let me see if I have a bundle here. Because sometimes I do better with a visual. All right, I found one. Shameless plug. One of the things I didn't mention is I'm also now a designer for Island Boutique. So I design fabric, which is like the coolest thing ever that I get to do. And my line that's coming out right now, should be out in stores right now, is called Winged Things.
Pretty.
Okay, so here is a fat quarter bundle of Winged Things, which in another couple of weeks, I'll be having a little Instagram hop and giving this away. But let's say I had this, right? And I sat there and I said to myself, all right, I've got the pattern actually uses more, like some of them have to be a half yard. Guess what? That's okay. You just find 2 colors that are close to each other and insert them in the same place, right? So if I'm looking at this, how would I start? Well, this is obviously a very orange and purpley kind of line, right? So I might start with opening it up and finding my favorite print that I want to work off of, right? So maybe I want to do more purples. So I might start with, okay, here's all the purples. Figure out which one I want. This is a really pretty dark.
Oh, it is pretty. Now, okay, I'm going to say, and I can see a couple of the comments. I've gotten it figured out. So if you guys do have questions, I'm trying to monitor on Facebook while we're talking. So if you do have a question, and one of the questions is, would this work as a scrappy quilt? And of course, I say to myself that you would have to use all of those purples or all of those coral colors. Like I couldn't use just one. So,
Yeah.
and is that possible? Like if I say I
Yes.
like 3 colors, I like white, coral, and purple. And when you held that up, wasn't that kind of the gist of that?
Yeah.
Hold it up.
Yep.
So can I use every one of those prints in this quilt?
You could. And how I would do it personally. And you have to remember that there are some people that are amazing at like full on scrappy quilts. I like a little order to my scrappy.
Okay.
so so what
That's
I would
you.
do,
That's
huh?
you, and that's what's exciting here, right? Is that we all get
Yes.
to be us, be you, and so you like a little more order. I'm good with winging it.
Right, exactly. And I definitely like some more order. So probably for me, what I would do is let's say I'm starting with the dark and I want to use this darker purple. So you've got 2 pieces of the darker purple in this block. I mean, 2 pieces of the dark in this block. So I'd pick one for one of them and one for the other one. And that way I could keep some order to my scrappy because again, I like order. But you could also just take things that are close in value to each other, like all these 3 are very close in value, and just mix it up.
As in
So
say,
you
like for me, when I
absolutely
see those 3, they if you want to say in essence, look the same
right.
over the course of the screen here.
Yes. Yep. So you absolutely could just do it by value and color, but mix up the prints.
Yeah. So back to your fabric, your fat quarter bundle there. So what would you use as your light?
So, there's a lot of options in here. I have a couple of really fun, like really light ones in here. This one's like my favorite because it's
Nice.
just got this wisp of color. And if I wanted to go really soft and springy and use a lot of this, I might use that. But if I wanted to keep it like more to the in like this doesn't have a real light. My light is this green. So if I wanted to do that, I might pick this one. So because it's got some, but again, this one's kind of a big print. I'm not sure if it's going to work, right?
Yeah. I could
Um,
see. I could see where that could be a little bit big.
but I've got this one, and this is a nice light, soft yellow. So that might be kind of fun as my light. And
One
then,
would
I could
no, go
just
ahead.
play with these. I could just play with these and change this up. I mean, obviously, I did blue, I did green, and orange was my pop of color. But keep in mind, I could switch that up, right? I could make all of this sort of my orangey stuff. And this is sort of my purpley stuff. And then add something else to be a little, boop. I love adding a pop of color. I love adding something that's unexpected. One of the things that happens to people is we love to match, right? As quilters, we love to match and we love to have this that matches this perfectly. And when we pick up a fabric like this, we go and we make sure that the blue that we pick is exactly this blue, right? And that it matches perfectly. But sometimes when we do that, we overmatch. And when we overmatch, we sort of take the vibrancy out of the quilt. Sometimes you need that unexpected color. Sometimes you need that pop that instead of picking the green that matches exactly, maybe you pick a green that's a little bit different. And that difference plays off everything else and makes it really pop and be exciting. I don't know. That's just something
Oh,
I like to think
and
about.
yeah, and it is exciting. And now I'm also thinking about, do you ever use, I mean, I know you use EQ, which for
Mhm,
people who do not know what that is an electronic program, a computer
mhm.
program that you can put color in. Do you ever use pencil, like colored pencils and paper to play out
Yes,
color and see how it would play out in the design?
absolutely. Yes. So, and I think you could really do that with this. So, because what you could do
Yes.
is you could take this because it's such an easy block. It's just squares and rectangles. So you could take a piece of graph paper and you could draw it out and you could use your colored pencils and see what you like. And I think the one thing about this block that is really important to keep in mind is that what happens when those pieces come together, when those blocks come together.
Mhm.
Um, so again, when you do it the way I did it, you get this secondary pattern. But you could also just do the same block, the block straight across, and you get a whole different effect.
Yeah. Oh, my mind is turning. Can you see it? It's
Yeah.
turning because this morning I walked into my sewing room and I thought, oh, now do I want to take a piece of fabric with me? And I wasn't feeling it like the right
Hmm.
one. Now I've got some ideas and cannot wait to go back home and pull from my own stash.
Right.
Despite and then heck, I have all this stash as well to pick from, but
Hmm.
there's so many options. Oh, Kate, again, you're just filling us with all sorts of ideas about fabric selecting, and that has been our goal. Before we get I mean to the point of wrapping up, I do
Hmm.
want to have you say your website address.
Okay. It's pretty simple. Kate Colleran Designs. And the only thing that's hard to spell sometimes is Colleran, and it's Colleran. So katecollerandesigns.com.
And I have tagged you on several posts. I will put
Hmm.
that address as well. But by all means, if you are liking what Kate is saying, she has a wealth of information, patterns, designs, tools,
Hmm.
fabrics that she's talking about, and that is wonderful. And so I want to make sure that our customers know how to find you.
Oh,
That
thank you.
yes, so that is wonderful. And there is a question. Um, can you repeat? You kind of said this at the very beginning. Can you repeat in the quilt behind you
Hmm.
what is the light, the two mediums, and the dark? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So
So I
let's.
wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
point. So your light is
this is my light right here, this yellow green.
okay. Then
Okay.
you would have a dark. Let's just go to the dark, and that
So
is
that's
the
my
darkest
dark number
purple.
one.
Okay.
And this is my dark number two, this teal.
Okay. And then you would
Okay.
have had a medium cool
Medium cool is this aqua green.
and a medium warm.
A medium warm, there's two of them. So one of the medium warms is this, and one is this.
Okay.
These two right here. Now, some people might think this is more of a dark, and especially on the video, I think it looks even more dark than it is in person. Um, in person, it's a little bit lighter, but this is sort of a I don't know, it's a purple, almost a magenta kind of color, which is fun. And then this one over here, this blue violet is my medium light.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yep.
for that explanation. And another question that has come up, not necessarily in this morning's comments, but would you recommend using 2.5-inch strips? Today, those are so available. We do not happen to carry them at Hen and Chick Studio, but
Mhm.
would you recommend using a 2.5-inch strip, a roll as a beginning point?
Sure, absolutely. Because if you think about it, and I'm going to use this fat quarter pack, right? Because this is
Right.
what I have in my hand. But if this was a strip pack, right, you could do the same thing. So you could start to use, like, you could say, okay, well, I'm going to use all the strips that are in this color range for my darks, and here's some mediums, and here's some lights, and here's, those kind of fun I could use where I use the coral and the purple, right? So you could use strips. I mean, this is all based off 2.5-inch squares and 2.5-inch rectangles. So absolutely the strips would work.
Oh, yes. One more concept that I just want to touch base on before we do
Sure.
wrap it up, is do you ever work from a picture? Like if you like, I love to take pictures, and
Oh
people
my
see
gosh.
I'm constantly, taking pictures. So if I, go and take a beautiful picture of a landscape and I'm like, oh, I love this. I love this. Do you work with something from that like that also for
I
colors?
do. I do. I mean, and it's funny because that's something when I was talking about color somewhere else, that was one of the things I talk about, that taking pictures or cutting pictures out of magazines, and they don't have to be quilts. They could be rooms, right? Pictures of rooms that you just love, or a landscape that you just love. I love to go to the Botanic Garden here in Denver. It's an amazing garden, and I love to take pictures. And it's a great way to get like a color scheme, So, and one of the ways that I tell people is, I have like a physical scrapbook of pictures that I've cut out of magazines over the years. A lot of us don't have magazines as much anymore, but you could definitely create your own digital scrapbook with your own photos, but also by going someplace like Pinterest and just putting in blue living rooms or purple bedrooms or green rooms. Do you know what I mean? And getting ideas, because when you see those rooms, especially ones like the decorators put together or in magazines, they've color coordinated it for you. So if you find one that speaks to you, that'd be a great way to then go take that picture and pick your fabrics from it.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
absolutely awesome. Oh, well, Kate, you and I could go on forever. We could chat, but I do
Yes.
think it is probably time to wrap things up. I can tell from the few comments that I'm seeing that people have found this conversation to be very useful. Now, if
Oh,
you're
good.
just joining us and are saying, I don't have any idea what we're all been talking about, let's just reiterate. The quilt that is hanging behind Kate Colleran, and Kate is the designer of Box Step. That is a free downloadable pattern at hiddenchickstudio.com/box step. Type it in as one word, the backslash box step, or even on the front page, there's a box step thing. Just click on that. It'll take you right to the page. But that's a free downloadable pattern. So if you're thinking this is a pattern that I could use up a ton of stash, then grab it, use it. I already know hundreds of people have downloaded it and we're excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to participate in our Box Step Sew Along, today is the first day of 4 weeks of videos. Next week, we're going to be talking about cutting. I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to say everything from starting with a strip, a 2.5-inch strip, creating your own 2.5-inch strip with a typology ruler, how to cut up a fat quarter, that kind of thing, or straight yardage. The next week will be piecing. Lots of good tips, because every step of the process, you have to be accurate in order to get the results. And I would say this is a quilt where we really have got to look at accuracy so that we keep everything nice and flat. So the third week will be piecing. And then the fourth week always is that let's wrap it up and see how we would actually finish it. Now, for our purpose, you only have to complete the top by the deadline, but it does have to be a pieced top and the same size as the original pattern or larger. So if you like this pattern, it is a 54 by 70-inch quilt, great lap quilt, great size. I'm going to say to be able to gift that to somebody. That is the minimum size that you can make to participate. Can't do a table runner version of this. For our purposes, I know not this time, but it would look good as a table runner too.
It'd be cute.
And then, but of course, if you say, and we always have at least one person who says, awesome project, I'm making it king size, go for it. If you have it done by the deadline, then your name is going to be entered. You're going to upload that picture to our website. Again, all of that information is at hiddenchickstudio.com/boxstep. And your name will go into a drawing for a prize. Your photos will get uploaded to the website so that you'll have a chance to see. And it is always inspiring, just inspiring to see all the different variations of the box of any pattern. And this time it'll be fun to see the different variations of box
It
step.
will.
It will
I
be
can't wait to see.
absolutely. And Kate, so glad. We know each other. I'm going to say we've known each other for several years. We work with each other in different parts of the industry. And I just want to put a plug in for any quilt shop owner that is looking to work with a designer. Something like this is an awesome opportunity to collaborate. And I love that our industry is so open to that. And the ability to be able to work together is exciting. So I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's been so much fun to just talk about fabric and color, because, of course, it's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye to everybody on our Facebook Live today. Again, the recording of this will be available at that webpage of hiddenchickstudio.com/boxstep. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.